It's time for my favorite real estate market update of the entire year. It's the 2024 year in review wrap up for the Twin Cities. So if you're thinking about buying or selling next year or this year in 2025, you've come to the right place. And not to be totally nerdy on you, but I went through about 30 pages of a new report that I found, and I've dug out the best little nuggets. So I think you're going to be in for a real treat. So let's get right into it. And we're going to start with the number of new listings. This is one of those new little graphs. This is only the last 5 years. Everything else is going to be about as far back as I can go. But with these, you're looking at 5 years, and last year, 2024, we had about 65,000 homes got listed in the Twin Cities. Now, this isn't the number of homes for sale. This is the number of new listings that got put on the market. And that was up about 8.2%, as you can see from the previous year. So if you're looking at this, you're thinking, hey, we had a pretty average year, a decent number of new listings that hit the market. But let me zoom out for you, and it's going to be all about perspective. This is the normal graph that I show you from InfoSparks. This is pulled all the way back to almost 20 years, and this is the number of new listings trending over time. So as you can see, we've known for quite a while we were very, very low on our number of new listings, and that was just dropping through COVID. The really great interest rates had a bunch of people move. COVID had people moving, and then everybody hit the brakes when interest rates spiked up. So that's what you're looking at there. We have seen that come back. Now, what was interesting, if you were following me a year ago, I expected us to see something like this. We thought it was going to come out fairly quickly, and it didn't do that. I mean, the last year or so has been pretty mediocre as far as the quantity of new listings coming out. So why is that? What's going on? Really, it's because we're just seeing so many current homeowners that bought at the really low rates not that long ago, and they would like to move, but with rates where they are right now, they're not going to leave a 3.5% for a 6.5%. And so that's really got people holding off with the quantity of new listings. However, it's actually not nearly as bad as it might seem. What you're looking at right here is the inventory of homes that are for sale. So previous slide, all of those that got listed for sale, and then how many are currently left over. And this is going to give you a little bit more of an insight into the relationship. Although we saw 8.2% more, a big push of more listings get put on the market, we also saw a big push of buyers coming into the market too. So that's with, as rates went down, especially first-time buyers that don't have to sell in order to buy, those buyers are jumping into the market. And so you can see here, we're actually down. There's 3.4% fewer homes available currently on the market than there was 1 year ago, despite all the extra listings that got put on. Next, why don't we look at new construction homes for sale? Now, this is one of those little nuggets that I had found that I think is going to be a pretty interesting sort of history of where we've been and where we're going for people that aren't aware. So let's talk early 2020. During this little plateau right here, this is when they had homes already existing and built or that were pending, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hit right in here, right? But then all of a sudden they had this major problem, which they couldn't build houses due to supply chain issues getting the building materials to the sites. And they also had a labor shortage of people that were actually able to build the houses. Then you couple that with a ton of buyers that were very motivated all of a sudden to get out there and buy a house, but they had no products to actually sell them. So that created a huge deficit in new construction across the whole U.S. And so you can see there, 2021, they dropped down to like half of what they had been selling previously in just 1 year before. So that was a major issue. So this is right around the time where new construction builders got very savvy and they realized, okay, interest rates are going up to 6, 7, 8%, but we still got a ton of buyers that want to buy. And now we've got the ability to build the homes again, finally, with the supply chain issues and the labor shortages that's kind of been resolved. But now we've got the interest rate problem. So those big builders stepped in and they started offering huge incentives like 4.99% interest rates, plus $10,000 towards your closing costs, plus some other bells and whistles thrown into the home. And by doing that, they actually stole some of the market from the previously owned market and shifted those buyers over into being new construction buyers, because all of a sudden for the same payment, I could buy a brand new house versus getting a 20, 30, 40-year-old house that needs some work. It was kind of a fascinating thing to watch in the industry, but that's what you're seeing right around here and how they got the new construction home sale numbers back up. So where are we at right here, and why is this number dropping so much? Well, two different things. First of all, what I've noticed the last several months is the builders are expiring some of those big incentives that they were offering. So versus before, you might get a 4.99, now you're getting like a 5.5. Well, that's still a great interest rate, obviously, with rates being up in the high sixes right now, but it's not nearly as much of an incentive as it was previously when rates were at 8, and I was either going to get an old dumpy house that I had to do some work to, or I can get new construction. The gap is coming together on what that payment's going to be. With interest rates coming down, it's just not as big of a divide. So I think people aren't pulling up to that upper bracket as much with new construction. That's the first thing. The second thing is totally unrelated, actually, and a new construction builder rep friend of mine that I talked to this morning, and I said it in front of him, I said, hey, what's the deal with this? Why are there so few new construction homes for sale right now? And he said he works with one of the big national builders, and I suspect this might be the same for the other one. There's really two in our area. But he said they finally gotten smart and they've realized that if they build too many homes September, October, and November, they price them at, the premium that they're hoping to get for them. And then when they don't sell as we go into the winter months, they have to drop those prices down. So they're just going down, 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 trying to get them sold before the year end. But then January 1st rolls around. What do you do with all the homes that they didn't sell, that they built early, later in the fall, right, early winter? Well, basically, they just have to sell them at the lower price point, which they don't want to do because all of a sudden there's that surge of buyer demand that happens January 1st. So what do you do with that? Well, they are now waiting until January 1st to be putting those new homes on the market. Now, typically the homes are going to get listed about the time that they break ground, but they're just breaking ground later in the year so that they can put that home on the market in January and February and have a fresh new listing to sell you at a premium instead of giving the discount that you kind of could have gotten before. So that's ultimately what you're looking at here. So are we concerned? Not really, frankly. They're going to get smart enough. Rates are going to keep coming down. They're going to keep their incentive packages going enough to get buyers in the door. And then I suspect we're going to see a pretty big boom of new construction listings get put on the market in January and February. And I'm going to show you in just a second what that seasonality looks like for when our market takes off. But we'll come back to that in just a second. First, why don't we transition back to resale homes and what does it look like for someone selling their house right now? What you're looking at right here is the number of showings that happen on a listing until the property goes pending. Now, this is relevant for both buyers and sellers, but let's talk about sellers for a second. The number of showings that happen before the property goes pending is currently at 10. It's actually been that way since the middle of 2023. So the last year and a half, essentially, it's been at 10 days on market. Now, what does that mean for a seller? First of all, I think sellers need to understand they're not going to have 20, 30, 40 showings on their property. And if they're not seeing that, they don't need to be discouraged. You'll see up next is going to be days on market, but our days on market is slowing down just a little bit. However, the number of people seeing the home is also going down. And I think that's actually a really good thing for sellers. Buyers are, in my opinion, I've been doing this 8.5 years now. I think buyers are getting a little bit more savvy and a little more specific. They're ruling homes out online. So if you haven't presented that home well by pricing it correctly and presenting it, decluttering, getting it staged, looking really good, and hiring a great agent that's really going to market it well, if you haven't presented it well online, buyers aren't coming in the door. And so this shows it right here. I don't think I've ever actually showed up this graph before for you guys for the number of showings to the property goes pending, but buyers are getting more choosy. And if it doesn't meet their criteria online, they're not willing to waste their time to go see it in person. This also honestly supports, and it wasn't initially part of this whole conversation, but if you remember back in August when commission structures kind of changed and got morphed a little bit with the different settlements, if you are providing any sort of friction, I think the number of buyers coming in your door has just dropped dramatically. And I'll share those stats and what's going on with all that in the next market update probably. Totally not relevant for today, besides to say that sellers really need to present the listing really well upfront when they list the property. Here's what it looks like for seasonality. And I wanted to bring this one up primarily for those that are thinking they're going to buy in the next few months. What's that market going to look like? Buying or selling? This, what you're looking at right here, is the number of showings that happen on a property per listing by month. So let's start with December, which is where we're just coming out of. November and December, 3.8, 3.6 showing per listing. That's all. So if you've got a listing that's been on the market and you've only been having a few showings, it's probably feeling really discouraged. Hang in there because January is coming. So we went from 3.6 as the average number of showings per listing to now 5.3, 5.9, 6.4. So really immediately from December to January, there is going to be a huge surge in buyer activity. And as you can see right here, we actually peak in March. So if you're waiting until April or June, you're thinking during summer, you're actually going to miss that peak anyhow. So what does that mean? If you're selling your home, early is definitely going to be better. January, February timeframe is going to be best. You do not want to wait very long because this is the number of buyers that are out. This is how many people are going to be coming through your door to potentially buy your house. And in order to do that, back to my previous conversation, is you've also got to have the home prepared. So hiring your agent early, they'll get the stager out there, photos, all the things ready to get the listing going. If you didn't already do that in November and December for a January list date, you're going to want to get on it quickly. And this is exactly why. As far as buying goes, it doesn't take too long to get into the market as a buyer. You just got to get pre-approved, obviously, and start shopping. But hiring your agent, understanding the process, getting your finances in order, all those things are really important. Just things happen earlier in the year than I think a lot of people realize. I saw this graph and I thought it'd be helpful for you. I digress. Let's get back to media days on market. Now, this is how long, of course, properties are spending on the market. Now, our previous slide was how many showings are happening per listing. This is how long that listing is sticking on the market. So just like with our number of new listings, it was very low and we've started to see things trend up. So that's the good news. What has been kind of interesting is it's sort of lackluster in a way. So this was mid-2023 to about mid-2024. We basically stayed flat. There really was no change in days on market. We expected that number to start going up, meaning the market would slow down a little bit, but actually didn't do that. Pretty much stayed flat during that period of time. And then also, strangely enough, towards the end of last year, we started back up again. So you wouldn't really expect that for the winter months. These graphs are the rolling 12-month average. So that's not just our current winter that we're coming through. That's also the previous winter and what's happened over the whole year. So overall, it doesn't have me terribly concerned. I am actually glad to see it going back up. That sort of fits the mold of what we were doing before. However, I don't think we're going to be going nearly as high as we used to. I've talked a lot about we're kind of mirroring 2019, and so we're getting back on track with that. That's where we're at currently, and we like to see that. We're currently sitting about 22 days on market, and I expect that we will still go up over the next year, but I don't think it's going to be significant. I don't think we're going to see a lot of change, and I think some more little plateau in our graph there is pretty likely. Now, as that was your days on market, what I'm going to show you now, I don't think I've ever seen before because I've never found the graphic to really display it, but this is cumulative days on market. Now, what's the difference? Previous slide is your days on market. That is, you call me, we list your house, and it's assigned an MLS ID number, okay? Your MLS number, it racks up while that MLS number is on the market, the home's on the market unsold, and that's up until the point that it goes to pending status. So inspections and everything up to that point, it's going to be racking up the days on market. That, however, is only for that MLS ID. So the cumulative days is if you've ever had that property listed beforehand without it selling, it will add up all of those days on market from all the different MLS IDs, and it'll total those up. So a lot of people think, well, I'm going to list it before the holidays, and if it doesn't sell, we'll just take it off over the holidays a little bit and then try to get in January. Totally fine. However, that new listing will say both 0 days on market for your new listing, and it'll add up both the total for the rest of them. And there's actually 2 different days on market we can see in the back end. So what does this mean for you? Why do you even care? The reality is because if you're looking at your cumulative days on market, this is honestly a more accurate picture for how long it actually takes that seller to get their home sold versus the previous slide. And what we almost always have referenced in the past was the actual days on market for just that unit's listing. But that doesn't give the whole picture. So in reality, 45 days on market is how long it generally takes the seller to get their home to pending status. And what that'll look like often is they list their home, but they don't prepare it very well. The buyers don't respond very favorably, and then they take it off the market. They might do some new flooring or some new paint or change some things, and then they go to relist it again. They had it on the market for 60 days, and then they put it back on the market again for another 30 days, and then it sells, right? So it's adding those things up. It's listing it before the holidays, then taking it off for a while, then relisting again for that type of thing. Whatever it is, you just need to know in the back of your mind that in reality, it's actually not that the average person is taking 22 days to get their home sold. They're actually taking like 45. Another one that I found that was a nice little nugget that I've not seen before. It was just little gold mines that I was finding. This is your cumulative days on market, but we're separating out single family and townhomes. And I can't tell you honestly how many times people have asked, well, should I buy a townhome? Is that a bad investment? Am I going to have a hard time reselling it? My answer's always kind of been no, but it's been more of a gut feeling based on my experience because I've never seen this data point or really anything like it separating single families and townhomes. So the reason I bring this up isn't so much to show you the actual number of days on market, but it is just to say, I found this really interesting that previously single family homes sold more quickly, which would have been kind of my gut, that single families higher demand and they'll sell more often. There's also just kind of a lot of townhomes sometimes in a community. So with that, it actually previously was that way. Single family sells faster. However, that is switched in the last couple of years. I wasn't even aware of this. But currently, townhomes are actually selling in 12 days higher on market. That's like 20% longer days on market, roughly 25. And single family homes are selling faster. So I don't think that's really much of a case to say, well, you or have a better investment with a single family versus a townhome. There's a market for both of them. And I think the demand is relative to the supply of those types of properties. But in any case, if that's got concern for you, if you're listing a townhome, just be aware it's going to be sitting on the market a little bit longer. Next up, let's talk about month supply of inventory. Now, this is one that it was like the holy grail. It was the metric that you kept an eye on. And to be honest, as I've gone over the years in my career, I've liked this metric less and less and less, to be honest. First of all, if you don't know what this is, you're new to the channel, welcome. Thanks for being here. Subscribe. Month supply of inventory is basically that relationship. Are we in a buyer's market or are we in a seller's market? Let me do my brush out here again. Traditionally, people would say you're supposed to be between 4 and 6 months supply of inventory. In that range, that's the balanced market. If you're lower on this graph, it's a seller's market. If you're higher, it's a buyer's market. But honestly, that seemed really weird. Some people will also just say it's just 6 months. 6 is the target, and that's what we're going for. I always felt like that was kind of crazy because even right now, to be honest, it feels more like a balanced market to me. Now, I've only been doing this like 8-9 years, right? But even in that period of time, it seems like it's sailed out a lot more. I certainly could see things becoming more buyer favored, but also we are at such an extreme sellers that we've hit a middle ground. This is going to be essentially the demand between how many buyers are there and how many sellers are there. But this is also going to be how quickly are we selling off those homes that are there, of the inventory there, how many months does it take to get the home sold? So that's what you're looking at. 2 months is what they're saying is our month supply MSI number. Ultimately, I think this is a little bit misleading simply because homes frankly sell a lot more quickly. Buyer intent is a lot higher. They don't want to go look at a whole bunch of homes over weeks and months. This is sort of the instant gratification. Amazon, one click buy, it's on my doorstep in 4 hours. If I have to wait 2 days, that's annoying, right? That's the world we live in. And so I think overall things are just going to be selling a lot more quickly. So I think we need to shift our mindset. What that number is, I don't know. We have seen this number to keep coming up towards being more balanced. It's definitely feels a pretty equitable market that's just quicker paced. And so I think that's about average to what we're seeing in the market. If you're buying a home, you need to move quickly, but you don't need to be frantic. You're probably competing in multiple offers on a really good home that's staged well, presented well, looks right online. It's in a good neighborhood. Higher demand will certainly have multiples, but there's also plenty of times where there's 30, 40, 50, 60 days on market and the home's still selling around list price. We're certainly trying to get deals and to negotiate those down, but percentage of the list price is staying pretty consistent regardless. Really briefly, another thing I thought I'd touch on while we're talking about month supply of inventory. This is back to that new construction conversation. There have been some pretty significant shifts in new construction happening. The blue and red lines here are 2020 and 2021. This was when they couldn't hardly sell anything for all the reasons we talked about before. And then this is when things boomed. Now, part of why I have this love-hate relationship with MSI is this isn't really accurate. It didn't become suddenly considerably more buyer favored starting in 2022. It was still very competitive. You weren't really negotiating much at all on new construction, but they were offering you the incentives. So there was a ton of demand and activity on that. So you kind of got to ignore the grass or ignore the numbers a little bit. But as far as just the amount of activity on new construction, there was a big boom. And what's kind of nice is we are seeing that shifting back. Now, again, the numbers on here are inverted, so just trust me with what I'm saying. But we are seeing it to becoming new construction to be a little bit more even. You're getting more things thrown in. I was just talking to a buyer rep, and he was saying they're now shifting to having to put in tile backsplashes, soft close drawers, and the hardware on kitchen cabinets, right? Things that we kind of used to thought was just normal. And of course, if you're buying a $400,000 or $600,000 starter new construction home, you would just assume you were getting, but you weren't. And with the pandemic and all that, I think the quality went down considerably. New construction became very, very cheap. And fortunately, I think we're seeing a little bit more competition getting forced with the new construction builders to have to throw in some of those things. They are still doing incentives, but not as much of them with rates coming down. But if you're looking at new construction, it's just become a lot more balanced of a market. Next up, let's talk about the actual number of homes that are selling. So we talked about number of new listings, homes available, showings, and we're making this progression through days on market to now the number of homes that are selling. We'll talk about sale price in just a minute. What you're looking at right here is actually it's a little bit older. They just put it out last year, but there's nothing published that I've found so far for 2024. So what you're looking at, this is through 2023's numbers. And this is what they were projecting for 2024 and 2025. Interestingly enough, pretty much all the reports that I've seen said last year had the fewest number of home sales in the last 30 years. And those were numbers I saw put out, I think in September or October. So even at that point, we were record low for the last 30 years, fewest number of homes for sale. So if you have a real estate agent in front of yours, say a prayer for them. A lot of agents are hurting. So in any case, I believe our number is going to show up around 4 million, just a little over 4.25 maybe. Million homes that were sold last year. That was incredibly low. I think it was about 500,000 fewer than the previous year. So if that tells you anything, that's a pretty significant drop. So why are we seeing those numbers? I don't think it's really any concern, to be honest, for people that are currently thinking about buying or selling. It's really just indicative of the high interest rates. People are kind of spoiled with their 3.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5% interest rates. And they don't want to trade that for a 6.5 or a 7% interest rate. So that's pretty understandable. I'll talk about projections here in a second. You can see back when they did this, they were expecting things to go up like that. We're currently not expecting 5.5 million like they had previously thought 1 year ago. Those were the national numbers. And here's a peek at what happened locally. Once again, the pandemic really had a surge of extra activity, people buying and selling before kind of the normal cycle of things. And then all of a sudden, as a result, that coupled with high interest rates, huge drop. Now, we were expecting this to be going up. Rewind a year ago, we were thinking interest rates are coming down. Everybody's projecting, hey, things are going to be great. We're getting out of these high 8s and 7s. We should be down in the 5s and 6s, right? 1 year later. Well, that's obviously not what happened. And so as a result, we had a pretty mediocre year as far as the number of homes that were sold. Now, if I'm honest, this doesn't really affect anybody but the agents necessarily and the quantity of homes. As the home consumer, you don't necessarily care, but it is just something to be aware of. We are expecting this one to go up. Again, my crystal ball is so worn out by now. I'm anticipating we will see this number to keep going up, but it's really anybody's guess. With what they're saying for inflation numbers and rates, that's not suggesting that we're all going to see any big surge. Prices are going to go up. We'll talk about those next, but with prices going up a little bit, interest rates coming down a little bit, people maybe getting in the market, we'll see what happens. And speaking of prices, here's what we're looking at again for the median and the average sale prices. Now, this is actually really encouraging to me. If we just focus over here on the medians, which is, let me give you something better. If we focus on the medians, that's primarily what we look at. Averages are good in their own right, but medians typically the number that's used. 3.3% up last year. I would say is a really healthy number. The year before, we were only at 1.4. That's pretty low. It was actually good, and I think probably necessary with where interest rates were in the high 7s and 8s. But 1.4 isn't sustainable. We would need to see more growth than that. But if you look back, I mean, this was insanity. We didn't want to see 11.5, 6.8. Those were some really crazy high numbers. So we don't want to see that. We don't want to see 1.4. We're kind of getting back to sort of a middle ground, and that's really, really encouraging. Our average numbers looking about the same. Nothing too significant there. Those are at 450. And then as we zoom out, this is what it looks like here. This obviously being way too much appreciation over the long run. And then we really sort of hit the brakes for a while, which is not a bad thing. But then we started coming up again. So this sort of a thing is what we're expecting numbers to keep doing. We want 4% is a pretty good target average over the long haul. That's what historically home prices will do. But we're not expecting flat. We're certainly not expecting prices to go down. Here's another little nugget that I found that will certainly intrigue to some people that might want to invest in properties, flip some real estate, or just buy a fixer-upper. This is the percent of sales that were distressed in the Twin Cities. And this is distressed meaning properties that were in foreclosure or that were short sales. And so they were about to be foreclosed on. Currently, we're at 1.1%. That's down. You can see these really low numbers here. That's really just from the pandemic when they didn't allow foreclosures with people that were delinquent, right? The government pushed pause on that. That's why they dropped, and they pretty much come back to where they normally were. Why is this important now? Only because this is circling back to conversations we had before, and there were a lot of people trying to create a bunch of fear saying, oh, the home market's going to tank. All these people that are delinquent on their mortgages, they've got no jobs, they're never going to make their payments. That didn't happen. None of that, at least locally. I don't know about the rest of the country. We're sitting at a really, really low number. So just again, as a side note, if you're thinking about flipping a home, I'm certainly happy to help you trying to get into that type of property. But I did the math, and I think last year, distressed sales in the market was like 496 homes, I believe, in the entire 16 county Twin Cities metro, 500 homes that were sold. So there's not a ton of opportunity for those properties, and the amount you have to pay for them is really high. Speaking of which, here's what those numbers actually look like. So on the left side, you're seeing traditional home values, median price being $380,000. Middle, short sales are at $290,000. Foreclosures on the right side there. We're just looking at the orange. That's at $250,000. So while you're thinking, hey, cool, I can get a foreclosed house for $250,000, the reality is they're usually in such rough condition. My wife and I actually have a background in flipping houses, if you didn't know. We flipped homes. We've got a rental currently, and so that's how we got into real estate. But the margins are so tight these days that we don't. I mean, if a property happened to show up, we might jump on it. But the amount you're paying, because there's so few foreclosures available, is so high. And then all the work you got to do to fix it up, then you're reselling the property for not that much more. And then by the time you have any closing costs or commissions or anything, the margins are super thin. So just a little side note, if anyone watching had thought about that, I saw that graph and I thought it was pretty interesting. So let's talk about interest rates. We're currently at 7.26. Now, I kind of choked when I saw that this morning. We hadn't been that high, but it just keeps creeping up on us. So where are we at from a year ago? That's almost honestly exactly about where we were a year ago. You can see rates really spiked in October, November 2023. They sort of mellowed out in 24, and we were thinking, okay, we were expecting these types of numbers to keep going down, right? In reality, they didn't. They came down and then they spiked back up, right in the middle of the year, like a bouncy ball. So that was kind of discouraging, to be honest, especially with the Federal Reserve doing so many cuts last year like they did. We were thinking we were going to be kind of home free and out of the woods on that. We're since not. We're over 7% again for this is Mortgage News' average rates. So where are we going in the future? Well, let me give you some projections here quick. First of all, NAR's chief economist Lawrence Yun put out this note. I think it was beginning of November. 9% increase in the number of home sales. That was that closed units. You guys don't really care about that so much. And then mortgage rates should be stabilizing near 6%. So that was pretty interesting. I actually found a couple more graphs. These are the same from last month, but I thought they're really important. So here's a bigger picture of mortgage rate projections. Fannie Mae, MBA, and Wells Fargo put out their numbers. Then really, if you just want to focus on the green on the right side there, at the very bottom is what they're projecting that we're going to be at for the end of the year, 6.33%. Now, this was put out at the end of November. We've obviously gone up since then, which is the opposite direction we're trying to go. So it's reasonable to think that these probably have gone up a little bit in their projection minds a little bit. So 6.5%, 6% is a pretty good ballpark for where we'll be. Certainly, you might be able to get a better interest rate. We might be able to buy down that rate. We might get the sellers to contribute towards buying it down. Like we have some options. But overall, we're not where we were thinking we were going to be. Not for this time of year and not for where we were hoping we were going to be 1 year from now to the end of 2025. And then as far as home prices go, here's projections from the top 19 big heads of the industry. They say 3.1% is what they're expecting for next year. So just like with this year, we went up 3.3. They're currently projecting we'll actually go up less next year in home prices than we did this year. I think that's perfectly fine. I don't have any concerns with that. Buyers will obviously rejoice. They're happy to not see that home price going up as much. So maybe it's going to cost you $380 right now. That's probably something like $390 that it would cost you for the same house next year. So that's not terribly significant. It's something, but it could be considerably worse. And then if we do see any little relief from interest rates, that could actually drop your payment down or maybe net you the same in a year from now as you are now. So that's what's going on around the Twin Cities. I would love to hear from you if you're thinking about buying or selling in the Twin Cities. My information in the description down below. About 2/3 of my business comes from people just like you watching me on YouTube. So would love to hear from you, and I'll see you next month.